Okay, so this intro is going to be short. We've listened to our patrons on Patreon, and we have listened to the folks on our social media and people that we've encountered in person, and they have said 15-minute intros are not sweet.
Well, it's kind of funny because I remember I was like, dude, I think our intros are too long. And then it was like, I edited last week's intro and I submitted a 15-minute intro to you. So I kind of didn't even follow my own advice.
I think I cut it down to maybe closer to 14 or like barely above 15.
Nice. You just, you cut a couple
of those.
I
just had to usurp you.
Yeah. So yeah, no, but let's keep it shorter, right?
Yeah.
And get right to the good shit.
The idea of these being long is to explain how our Patreon is helping us produce these. And so I guess to cut all that short, if you'd like to support us, go to www.patreon.com/Crude Magazine and shout out to our first and only company man right now, Trina Duber.
Yeah, Trina.
All right. So Michael Downey, that's who we're about to interview or have a conversation with.
Or who we did have a conversation with. Yeah. And so you know him from high school, correct?
I do, yeah. We went to high school together.
All right, so real quick, what was Downey like in high school?
He is an absolute character. It would not surprise me in the least bit if in the next couple months, in the next year, the next 2 years, whenever, it comes out that he's landed this huge, acting debut, and he just absolutely kills it.
Yeah, I mean, he was doing some pretty awesome voices, which... Yeah. Should make it into the podcast. So yeah, especially that one at the end. You should definitely tune into that.
Yeah,
I like
absolutely.
that one. Yeah.
All right, so here's Michael Downey. Mike is hot.
Mike's hot?
Mike's hot.
Is it recording?
It's recording. That's what that means, dude.
Crude conversations. Listen more, then you talk.
Go to work! I don't know where your notebook is, Dustin.
I don't know.
Trying to be professionals here, for God's sakes.
And we got a caller in. I think it's the former President, Barack Obama. Hey there, Cody. I just want to thank you for calling in today. I appreciate everything you're doing with the podcast. And I subscribe. Michelle loves it. I just want to say there's a lot of folks out there. They appreciate it. Thank you. You should do.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Well, you're welcome, boys, and look forward to hearing the next episode. You should do fake endorsements.
Yeah,
Barack Obama thinks it's
awesome. Great. Voice actors that do fake endorsements.
Have you heard the new Eminem album?
I haven't actually. I don't know if I want to, because I heard a lot of people talking, just saying disappointed like an aging rapper who can't really keep up with it. And I just don't know if I want to, have everything ruined.
Are these your New York Times friends that are telling you this?
These aren't the New York Times. No, that was actually Pitchfork, but they're always brutal on reviews.
Yeah, unless it's like an indie rock album.
Yeah,
or some EDM shit.
They're like, Animal Collective did a 90-minute track with just whale noises, but then auto-tuned it. Then they're like, oh man, that's a 9.8. Even then, they wouldn't give it a 10.
What would they give a 10?
Well, I think like one of the highest ones they had was Vampire Weekend's last album, which was really good.
It was.
I don't know. They're sticklers. They're prudes.
I thought they had it together in, I think it was 2007. They did like their top 50 albums or whatever they do of the year. And yeah, I thought they really, but I haven't.
I don't read
then.
New Pitchfork.
Yeah.
Only old Pitchfork.
Just go back in the archive.
I only listen to old albums.
No, but then they'll do weird stuff where all of a sudden it's like,
hey, Dustin, let me get your levels.
Nicki or Cardi B, they'll be like, Cardi B, 9. And you're like, what?
Dude, what?
Party with Cardi. And you're like, no, come on, guys. Is this their tree?
What is this Cardi B I keep hearing? And I heard she got in a fight with Nicki Minaj. And the only thing I've seen of Cardi B is like someone was like, here's a bunch of animals to Cardi B noises or some video they made. Does she make weird noises?
Yeah, I don't know. I think most raptors these days, the new ones are
Raptors?
We're talking about animals, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the new Jurassic Park.
Oh,
yeah.
I think it really polarized some people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What can you do? Your kids these days, you know?
Cool. Well, let's kick this shit off and get down to some real business.
Yeah.
What, no more talking about dinosaurs?
Oh, no, we'll get back to dinosaurs.
You can listen to the other podcast, Dino Talk, every They may be dead, but not in our hearts.
Not in our hearts.
Damn.
You're from Anchorage?
Yeah, I grew up in Anchorage. Went to Bear Valley Elementary, you know, and then Golden View and Service, and then they built South, so then sophomore year went there. So, yeah, born and raised here, and then went to school in Western Washington, and have always been coming back here. You know, I commercial fished for a while out in out of King Cove, Area M, and then before that, a bit of gill netting out of Cook Inlet. So yeah, you know, even when I moved away, even when I went to the Middle East, you know, I'd still come back for a bit in the summer and in the winter, because I mean, there's really no better place, in my opinion, in the world here. Like summers up here, it's incredible.
How about the winters?
If you ski or snowboard, amazing. Though the past few winters when I've been up here, I've gotten totally screwed. You know, you know, climate change. You know, it's
real.
It's totally. It's like, how do you deny that when I remember as kids, like our winters up here were way more harsh.
I always remember Octobers, because Octobers meant Halloween. You go get a Halloween costume, but all the extra larges were sold out. All the smalls were there, all the mediums were there, larges and extra larges were sold out.
You'd wear your snow gear under
exactly,
it.
yeah. Now
it's
all the larges and extra larges.
I go as a mermaid every year now.
Yeah, well, I'll be coming up, you know, I usually come up like 10 days before Christmas or something, and then I've been up here past few times, and there's green grass.
Yeah.
My parents' house up in Hillside.
It's crazy.
It's insane. And, you know, walking around in a T-shirt, you know, it's like 55 degrees.
And cargo shorts.
Yeah. I do not wear cargo shorts.
Okay, so
I'm not cool enough. Yeah.
So you for college, you went to Western Washington. And what did you study?
I studied Arabic and Middle Eastern studies. So it was kind of random. I originally was going to do international business. And after my first accounting class, I was like, nope, not into this. And I saw they had Arabic class. So I was just like, oh, that'd be interesting. And kept taking it. And then it got to the point where I was like, oh, no, I've taken so many Arabic classes that if I don't major in this, you know, I'm going to be at
So you
college
accidentally
forever.
majored in this?
Accidentally, yeah. And then I ran out of classes to take at Western Washington University. So then I went to the American University in Cairo to finish up, you know, the rest of my classes and requirements for that. And then, you know, the rest of it was history of the region, various religions, just kind of, you know, politics, international relations. That's what my minor is. And so, and then from there, just stumbled onto journalism. You know, the whole thing has kind of been, I guess, by chance, you know?
Yeah, no, I know. I got pretty excited because my degree was in international relations as well. And then I worked for a few years with the U.S. Department of State and Public Diplomacy, and ended up working with a lot of people from the Middle East. So to kind of see you take a similar path going from those kind of studies into journalism is pretty sweet, I'd say. You know, and I'm excited for some of the things we're going to be able to talk about tonight.
And so what was that trajectory like? Like, what was your first journalism job?
So first job was, so basically I wrote my thesis about the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, and you know, I had a bunch of really good contacts in there with the head of the youth movement, Khalid Hamza, and I just, you know, for the thesis I had a few set questions, and that didn't take very long, and it took a while to get a hold of them because they were still technically illegal, but also semi-tolerated at the time when Mubarak was still in power in 2010, and you know, I basically asked him, I said, hey, Mubarak's getting old. This is the former president of Egypt. And, you know, what's going to happen when he dies if there are free and fair elections. What's your stance on women's rights, relations with Israel, just kind of like across the board questions. And that was in June of 2010. And then just kind of like sat on it, didn't think anything. Then January 25th rolls around, see some sizable protests. But, friends in Cairo were like, at the time I was in Bellingham, Washington. I was calling them up and it's like, what do you think about this? Is this going to build? And everyone's like, no, because it's happened before. They're like, he'll crush it. It'll be it. Then it started to build. The next day it got bigger, and it was clear like this is gaining some momentum. So, I just sent out cold emailed a bunch of editors, and most people were like, what have you written before? I'm like, nothing really. I'm a student. So, but World Policy Institute basically took a chance, and they basically published. I wrote a bit of a thing, and then did a transcript of the interview, and then after that, the Atlantic picked that up, then Time, a few others, Columbia Journalism Review, and then all of a sudden, just got a call from this French journalist who's like, "Hey, can you come to Egypt and help me?" So then I talked to my professor. Like, how would you feel about me missing a little bit of class and go join this revolution? So yeah, just hopped on a plane and then went and covered that. And then that's when my first real articles with Rolling Stone magazine for the Middle East edition. From then until 2012, I kept writing for them. Some stuff politics, some stuff music. And then slowly kind of transitioned a bit more towards photography, which first photo thing I did was actually Portugal the Man, and for Rolling Stone US out in Wasilla. And then towards video, filmed for Channel 4 UK, and then that's when BBC picked me up, and I joined them for about a year before going off and doing the stuff I'm doing now.
And this is the stuff you're doing currently is for New York Times, right?
Yeah. So, I just got back from Zimbabwe a month ago, doing basically video dispatches. So it's like anywhere from like 4 to 6 minutes, kind of looking at, the whole story, So for Zimbabwe, it was centered around the elections, but it's like, okay, what's been happening in Zimbabwe for the past 37 years under Mugabe, and where's it heading? So now I'm, kind of branching out from the Middle East a bit more, to Middle East, Africa, maybe some stuff in Europe. So,
I talked to you, I think while you were in either Lebanon or Zimbabwe, and I remember you were pretty shook, from the situation that you had just come from. You were like, there was bullets whizzing by, it was mayhem. You were in a war zone.
Oh, that was Gaza.
Okay, Gaza.
Yeah. The last time was covering Gaza for PBS NewsHour, and that was the day of like the big march. It was right before, day before the Al Nakba March, which is the day that they call in Arabic means the catastrophe of when Palestine was taken from under their control in, it was 1948. So, there's Gaza is essentially the world's biggest prison. You want to go in and out of there. You first arrive, and it's passport stamp, passport control, but then you go through a series of rooms that just you get locked in, and then there's cameras up in each corner. I mean, it's very Orwellian. It's very bizarre. And
I'm kind of having trouble understanding this. So when you get into Gaza, it's like a sequence of rooms, like almost like a labyrinth.
It's like you'll go to one room, they'll check all your stuff, go through everything.
Kind of like customs.
Kind of, but it's so much more unnecessary, because you'll do the security check, and then you just sit in a room. You're just standing there, and you can see like the outside where it's a gate. It's kind of a long chained fence that you have to there's little carts that pick you up and drive you to the other side. But you'll just like stand there. There's no reason for it at all. I mean, it's really just to, you could say that the reasons they do that is to make it as uncomfortable for you as possible. So to dissuade journalists from coming back. And I mean, and when we exited, they take out all your gear. They threw one of my lenses, cracked one of them, and just like toss all your stuff. It's a subtle way.
It's intimidation.
Yeah, exactly. Because I mean, what we saw them do is they were unarmed protesters marching along the fence. Some of them weren't even storming it, just getting sniped. They shot over 1,200 people. I think the official number is higher, 1,500 people who were sniped. At least 60 killed. And I mean, it was madness.
Did you see any of this?
Oh yeah, I mean, we were covering the whole thing, filming that, and along the fence, and I mean, you could hear could hear the pop shots, and then the field hospitals were just, I've never seen something, a place that busy. Like your worst day, at any other offensive or whatever, you're not going to have that many casualties. But this was, I mean, 1,500 people they couldn't keep up with it.
Holy shit.
And because of the blockade on Gaza, it's really hard for people to get even prosthetic limbs. So you have a large population that's going to be completely, they're not going to have any kind of mobility. So it's the situation there is pretty dire.
And so as a journalist now that has fallen into this field of journalism, what makes you want to keep going back to these places, these worn, torn places like Gaza? And instead of just being like, oh, fuck it, I quit. Like, I almost got shot.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, you definitely have those moments where you're like, this is not good, and, most people like to say like, oh, do it for the story and the good. It's like, yeah, no, that is true. Yeah, there is a function to that, of course. But I think the reason going to these places, I mean, for one, it's been studying the language, speaking it so long, it's kind of my niche. So, and as a freelancer, anytime someone calls you up and they're like, hey, can you go do this? You're like, when someone says jump, you say, yeah, how high? Let's go. So you just always, you got to be ready to take work because there's times when there's nothing going on. You got to prepare for those times when it's just a drought. Like end of the year, usually by November, everyone's spent their year budgets and things get really slow. So that's part of it, obviously it is a job. A lot of people say like, oh, I go for truth and I mean, that is part of it. The idea of journalism is to, I mean, especially with Gaza, a lot of our coverage could hold a lot of people accountable. They're using live ammunition, sniping protesters. So, that's for historic record, and possibly, at some point, if there were any, the UN were to look into war crimes, that, could have that function. So, that's the admirable part of it. The other part is that, I'd be lying if I didn't say it was exciting. There is something about all of a sudden, you get a call and it's like, hey, when I was with the BBC, you'd get a call and it's like, you need, 4 hours and you got to be on a plane and head to Iraq. So, and the second all of a sudden, you're getting all your gear ready. It's like it's a bit of a rush. It's like a constant, it's exciting. You get a front seat to history. Sometimes it's not the most pleasant thing and it's pretty horrible, but, other times you do get to tell amazing stories, and you get a chance to really just kind of project stuff that normally wouldn't get a lot of attention.
So you spend half the time covering the Middle East and then roughly the other half of the year here in Alaska. Is that correct?
I used to, but now it's more, most of my time is overseas. My apartment's in Beirut. Usually what I used to do would be, I'd head back to Alaska early May, and then, it'd have to be on the boat for preseason around like May 25th, 27th, somewhere around there, and then would fish until the end of August. So, and then would come back for like a month in December, see the family. But now that time's, really kind of shrank. Things are so busy where I don't get, unfortunately as much time back here. But, this time I've actually had 3 weeks back, which has been amazing. Just being able to unwind, hike, paraglide.
So going back and forth from like, reporting in these somewhat war zones and then coming to Alaska, how has that affected you over the years, kind of going back and forth, that almost yin and yang?
I mean, at first it's the contrast is pretty stark, and it definitely was a little bit, you'd find yourself, especially coming directly from, a place like that, then all of a sudden you're here. And, you'd be a little bit irritated when, someone would be like, oh, Syria, what's that? What's happening there? And you get a little bit frustrated. But, you just have to realize it's like, what? It's a world away. It's kind of understandable. Not everyone is going to be, up to date on that. Obviously, the more informed people are, the more, in terms of, like, if you look at what's happening in Yemen, most people don't know what's happening in Yemen. Most people don't know that there's a risk of 17 million people dipping into a famine because the U.S. is, backing Saudi Arabia's blockade and war on mostly civilians there. The Houthis don't control that much territory really. So, and the U.S. has sold most of the weapons to Saudi. So most people don't know that. So that's the stuff where you definitely get a little bit frustrated.
Like it's basically like, Americans and Alaskans just have it so much easier and such more stability, even in like your food supply versus like what you see 17 million people on the verge of starvation. To have to like be around that and then come back and it's like you guys don't even realize how good you have it. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. Yeah,
Has that gotten any easier? Because I can imagine that might be something that's a little pervasive.
I think after a while, it's just one of those things where you really just kind of got to go zen, and then just realize, and that's also why with my work, why I've kind of moved from print to more video is I think you can reach a lot more people with it. And also why, I also kind of want to, get more into fiction because I think there's certain ways to reach that wider audience. Not everyone, it's basically the same demographic that's always going to be going to the New York Times looking for the news. You're not gonna get everyone. So yeah, I think while at times, it still can be frustrating stuff. I get it. When I come back here, my best thing to do is unplug. And that's also like when I'd be commercial fishing the summers. That was also my way of, you're not using your phone the whole summer, just toss it in your bunk and then check back in once you get back end of August. And it was bizarre. I remember one of the seasons came back into port at the end of June and my sister had messaged me and she goes, "Hey, what do you think about ISIS? What's the deal with ISIS?" And I was like, because she, you're like, all of a sudden it's like, I remember pitching that in 2013 and editors being like, "What, ISIS?" Like, nah, it's not a big concern. They were just kind of a small group, Eastern Syria at the time.
Yeah, it wasn't until, bodies started getting burned in cages, right, that we really started paying attention and they started doing some of the more, or were those more horrific things happening?
Yeah, the propaganda, it certainly has an effect. And mostly when they took over Mosul, that was when all of a sudden it popped up on everyone's radar. And I guess the irony in that is that, they've lost most of their territory, but and all of a sudden now everyone's, ISIS is gone. It's like the reality is it's not. It's an ideology, and you can't bomb it away. It's not going to go anywhere.
I think you definitely have like this unique perspective that I think a lot of war reporters or international reporters have, where you're in these places where all of these really horrific fucking things are happening, and you're seeing them firsthand, and then you're helping to produce the news in order to affect change, right? I think that's ultimately the goal with covering these things. And so when you see that maybe they're not affecting change, maybe in the way that they should, I guess my question is who do you think that you're creating the news for? Is it for the average like American or the average citizen, or is it, the
policymakers?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I don't think it's for, in my view at least, not a specific person. Of course, when you're doing something for like the New York Times, or like PBS NewsHour, then you do have policymakers, they're going to be looking at it or watching it. But, ultimately it's just, your job as a journalist is, is basically ethically and objectively report what's going on, and put it out there, because ultimately an informed population is going to be, more informed electorate, and you're going to have progress. You're going to have, hopefully, things improve.
Yeah. So me and Cody we discussed a little bit about journalism in the first episode, and we talked about, how important it is to be a part of a functioning democracy, but that right now in America, we seem to have a system that is not designed to inform, but is kind of designed to divide. So when you turn into the cable news at night, instead of just being presented what's going out there, you're presented with two talking heads that are just kind of arguing, and you would just identify with one of them, and you like automatically fight with them kind of subconsciously. And so last night I kind of Cody sent me one of the documentaries you worked on. Mm-hmm. And it was called Inside Turkey's Election, A Democracy on the Brink. And when it opened up, it said, a democracy when its institutions are under threat and its very survival is under threat, we came to Istanbul. And what I felt with that is you were trying to cover something to show Americans like, hey, we could be on our way to this if we're not aware of it. And I thought it was a really good way to present something that was relevant to us.
Oh.
So can you talk a little bit about that project?
Absolutely. I mean, I think one thing that people tend to underestimate is how easily a country can move towards authoritarianism. And Turkey's a great example of that. I mean, Erdogan, the president of Turkey, after a failed coup, he jailed all of his opponents. And even beyond that, I mean, you look at doctors, professors, students, the numbers are massive. I think it's over 15,000. And just eliminated all opposition. And anyone in the press, just shuts down newspapers. The second you start going after the press or freedom of speech, that's when you're in trouble. And it's particularly troubling when you hear the president of the United States talking about wanting to shut down newspapers. I mean, I think
a lot of people tend to think or tend to believe that happens over there, not here. Mm-hmm. And they can't bring that same mentality, that same objective kind of onlooking, like inward.
Oh, it's possible anywhere. I mean, that's the thing. I remember, after the Arab Spring was happening and their protests started in Syria, and talking to some people and being like, do you think this is going to, and this was after Libya, it was like, do you think this is going to turn into something similar? And people were like, no, the economy's fine, Sure, Assad, he's a dictator, but things are a bit looser here. It'll
he's a cool dictator.
It'll never happen. And then now look at it. The whole thing is never say never, because it can always take a crazy turn, and there's early signs of it too. I mean, if you look at how regimes work everywhere else, the president or leader, whatever they want to call themselves, they'll always put family members in positions of power. And what has President Trump done? It's very similar. If you actually look at the correlations, it's almost as if, authoritarianism 101. And the people that he's, buddied up to, the way he talks about, he called up Erdogan, congratulating him. He called up Putin after election, congratulating him. He called up President of the Philippines.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's a troubling sign that instead of, you're congratulating people who knowingly rig elections, are despots. And yeah, it's wild times. And the amount of trust in the press is at an all-time low. And I mean, a lot of that polarization, I think, is due to TV. Like you were saying, it's you turn on cable news and it's mostly just a shouting match.
Yeah, but what I'm just thinking, what if when you tuned in at night, instead of seeing that shouting match, you were able to see this documentary? But the problem is that short documentary you created doesn't make the money. It doesn't get the people looking. It doesn't, and we have a system designed to make money. Mm. Right? I mean, do you think that would compete with the shouting heads and get the amount of viewers that is needed to sell commercials?
Well, I think the whole like where we are now in journalism, we're in a very pivotal moment because we're seeing a lot of stuff moving to online. Print is barely hanging on, most people, but at the same time, you're seeing subscriptions actually working. I mean, the New York Times, Washington Post are doing incredibly well. Because once, people are like, oh, it's only 99 cents a month. Like, sure, why not? And you're seeing a lot more people go to these outlets for video, for print, for multimedia stories. And I think less people on television. I mean, I think the demographic that's watching cable news is kind of our parents' generation, older. So it's shifting, and they're trying to now, like the industry's kind of figuring out, how do we make money? How do we new ways of advertising, or is it subscription based? And younger people are looking more to online outlets. They're looking for, now more than ever, I think people are embracing kind of documentary style. You don't need necessarily a correspondent to be leading you through everything. I think there is definitely a thirst for good quality journalism. It's just that, a lot of massive media giants are, catering to the lowest common denominator. They're underestimating people's capacity. So
they're still hanging on to that old model.
Yeah, exactly. And it's shifting. And now people are becoming acutely aware with different streaming services, and that's like, oh, it's changing. That's why you've got, Vice has a deal with HBO for their nightly news program, and then their weekly documentary show. And now the New York Times has a deal with FX to produce a weekly show looking about how a story gets made. So it's shifting, and hopefully it'll work. But, I think the TV model, that is like cable TV, a lot of it depends on conflict, and to keep that going of like, oh, next, here's two people who absolutely hate each other. It's basically you're watching almost a blood sport,
like Crossfire.
Yeah, it's not productive really for it. It's not. There's no civility to it, and it's not really getting anything informative out there.
I've said this before. So Dustin's heard me say it quite a bit.
And he'll say it again.
But those two arguing talking heads, they're arguing their 1 point against the other 1 point. When in actuality, both talking heads are representing something that has a multitude of different points on either side. And that's not being conveyed. And I think that what they've done is they've simplified issues that are extremely complex. And so when you are a viewer, you have been trained to understand politics in that way, as an arguing match. And so you're watching it, and this person is arguing against this person, Republican versus Democrat, and you're like, okay, I'm a Republican or I'm a Democrat. That's my guy or that's my girl. I'm on their side no matter what. And I think that mode of thinking is on its way out. I don't know. I work with teenagers, and I don't know any one of them that watch the news, on TV. I've asked them because I've been curious, and every single one is like, oh yeah, whenever I go over to my grandparents' house, I watch it.
Yeah.
They have it on.
Exactly. Yeah. And also, I mean, the issues that polarize, the older demographics, the younger generations don't care about. They're like, what? Why are you still concerned about gay marriage? Like, that's a non-issue.
Think about how much things have changed in a short period of time. I mean, even within our lifetime. And I mean, you could probably base a lot of this on the internet and technology, but a lot of shit has changed. You know what I mean? And so you're having older people who are used to like 30, 40 years, the Cold War, the relative balance of things kind of always being the same.
Well, I think some people are willingly forgetting about the Cold War right now, though.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's kind of insane. Yeah. I mean, these are the same people that, you would see cheering on the McCarthy trials, and now, I've seen, some people wearing T-shirts like instead of, before the T-shirt was better dead than red, and now it's better red than a Dem or something like that. and you're like, what has happened?
Yeah.
And it's almost I don't know the reasoning behind it, but I think this is the most polarized I think I've seen this place, and especially living abroad and looking in and coming in here, and because I've covered it for a lot of foreign outlets, and thinking of America as covering it as a foreign country the same way I'd cover Iraq or Turkey. It's fascinating, and you see that this is the most polarized it's been.
Well, look at the
in a
Southern Poverty
long
Law
time.
Center. I mean, in my own ignorance, I didn't know who they were before I wrote an article for them. And now that I'm following them and I'm actually like seeing the product they're putting out there, I mean, they're huge.
Oh yeah.
And it seems like,
What do you mean they're huge?
I mean, people are really paying attention to them, and it's a lot of different types of people. So it's not just 20 to 30 year olds, and it's not just 30 to 40 or 50 to 60 year olds. It's a bunch of different aged folks.
Well, wouldn't they be branded as like a liberal media outlet?
I would think so.
Oh,
Yeah.
I mean, they are.
Yeah.
I did a story with, in Arizona and Montana with different militiamen.
Oh,
And
yes.
they all considered the Southern Poverty Law Center to be propaganda, leftist bullshit. Because they monitor, what to be considered militias, white nationalist groups, or
Hate groups, yeah.
No, they do have an asterisk that go like, hey, not all of these are hate groups, but there's a militia is a militia. But yeah, most people who I think more conservative or right wing certainly aren't big fans of it.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest problem now is that, like you said, it's a single issue that it's like you have to pick one side or the other. It's like you really don't. You can debate stuff. It's okay to have an opinion about stuff.
So, something happened, and you can look at like Paul Manafort, for example, and what he did in the 80s with like creating this like lobbying industry and this whole like industry around politics. And I think what we're facing right now is 30 years of this system evolving into what it is. And now some of the policymakers, like our parents, they are literally almost brainwashed, and I refer to them now as Manchurian citizens, where the Manchurian candidate would hear a trigger and he'd snap into a certain mode. It's like we have these certain triggers now that just send us into our political identity. And all the people at the top, whether it's in the media or the politicians, they know how to send these triggers out on these certain issues and like trigger that political identity and get you to be like a soldier marching for them no matter what. I mean, Trump does not represent any traditional Republican values, yet they all follow him blindly. I think he's been able to tap in, and Obama just mentioned this in his last speech in Illinois. We're not a product of Trump. Trump has tapped into a system that's been building itself up for years.
One of those things that we noticed with, hearing about Cambridge Analytica's role in all this, data is king here. You can, target a very specific demographic,
Or target a person.
Or it's a very specific person and find out, who is this person and cater very specific stuff to them. And that's the new way of winning elections. If you've got the data, you can do it.
Well, that's marketing.
Yeah.
It's turned into a game of advertising. And I think maybe it's always been like that. And maybe our generation is just more cognizant of it now. And it's much more specific. Like, I graduated with a degree in advertising. And throughout certain classes, we always talked about demographics this, demographics that, the 18 to 34-year-old demographic. Now, marketing companies and businesses don't need to market to a certain demographic. They can target an individual person. They can target Michael Downey. They can target Cody Liska. They can target Dustin.
They're applying the same principles of advertising to politics now. I mean, when I was in college, I did like some volunteer lobbying for a firm called R&R Partners. Well, it was a political lobbying firm and an advertising firm in the same building. And that's when I first kind of realized, whoa, something might be a little off here. Things might be going a little bit the wrong way and ruining our democracy.
Yeah, and that's where, now with Facebook and YouTube deciding to remove InfoWars, it's a complicated issue because, obviously Alex Jones says some wild stuff, from, Sandy Hook was staged and all the kids who were killed are crisis actors. And he's harassing the family members. That's horrible. It's horrible. But at the same time, it is freedom of speech. But then you also look at it is a private platform, and they do have the right to But the question is, and right now, obviously, if you're more liberal, you're going to be saying yes, that's good, and the right, now conservatives are going, oh, they're silencing conservative voices, and I do see where it's a slippery slope, because then it can easily swing back the other way, or it can go, but there is a responsibility for these massive companies like Facebook to realize their power to influence public opinion and sway elections and governments and policies.
Was it Oliver Wendell Holmes that said that bit about yelling fire in a crowded theater and the clear and present danger? I mean, I think that a little bit of that probably applies to the Alex Jones situation.
Oh, totally.
With each freedom comes responsibility. You know what I mean? And those have to get matched hand in hand. You don't, just because you have a freedom, whether it's the First Amendment or the Second Amendment, you can't just use that carte blanche, because we live in a society with each other. So we are actually, we have to bound our freedoms to a degree.
Yeah, I think, that's where, Mark Zuckerberg, is now starting to realize, he'd always be like, Facebook was created to connect people in the world. We're not going to limit it. It's free. But it's like, no, you've created a very, very powerful thing, and you need to realize that, and you have a responsibility. You can't keep pushing it back and be like, no, it's fine. You guys, police yourselves. It's like, no, you need to kind of rein that in.
Yeah, when you have 2 billion people on your platform, I think there needs to be some type of government in place or something along those lines.
Here's what happened is they started harvesting data and using it to make money. But the problem is that when other people are allowed to tap into that data harvesting, and they can use it for maybe malicious intent that doesn't work for society.
Yeah.
Cambridge Analytica, for example.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, ultimately, Facebook likes to be like, oh, we're a community. It's like, no, they're a data company. Yeah. They're an advertising company. That's how they make money, and we are all totally responsible for fueling it.
Yeah.
Most people are like, I don't like that. It's like, well, it's pretty easy, just delete it.
Yeah.
But it's become a staple of society almost. So it's hard for people to leave that.
So I have to log in to Facebook every time I come to work, because I'm managing social media, or I'm talking to people. And so it has infiltrated our lives enough to have become a part of our jobs.
You know what we need to do, though? We need to stop pointing our fingers at Facebook, at Trump, at all these people in power, and we need to figure it out on our own, because we still are making choices. And so this kind of brings me back to something we talked about before too, which is critical thinking.
Yeah.
The individual needs to become, I'm going to say it, woke. I hate that word. We talked about it earlier.
I kind of like it when teenagers use it.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, no, it's a good thing, but we do.
Very hip of you.
Thanks, man. Do you know what I mean? We need to think critically about this shit, because we're close on that verge.
Absolutely. I mean, now the biggest thing you notice is whenever someone, has a question, or like, oh, what is, this fact or something? Google it, and they go, oh, that's the answer. They win their argument with their friend or something, and then close out their phone, and then that knowledge that they just had goes right out the window. No one processes it.
Yeah.
I think definitely, having our phones and this to us has become such a crutch, and it's eliminated a lot of that critical thinking. And also our education system certainly doesn't help there. It's pretty dismal.
We have a long way to go.
Yeah.
To make sure we have a society that actually uses critical thinking. I think that's what we're coming to here.
And speaking of long way to go, you're into paragliding, aren't you?
I am. Yeah. I was actually just kiting right before I came here.
You were up in the air?
No, I'm gonna fly. I think I'm gonna fly Pioneer Peak tomorrow.
You like how I just switch the subjects right there? The topic?
That was
Cody?
a smooth transition.
You're getting good at this shit, man.
I'm almost like a little bit suspicious. Like all of a sudden you're going to like slide in an advertisement there. When you're up in the air, you know, you need...
Fly with Alaska.
Yeah, exactly. Right now, sign up for a credit card.
Well, actually, our new model's advertising free, so...
But yeah, no, I do paraglide. That's one of the things, like getting back here. Flying's amazing up here.
How do you get?
I mean, it depends if there's thermals, but I mean, you know, Pioneer Peak's almost 6,400 feet. You don't launch from the top there because there's like, you just reach like that top kind of shelf.
Why don't you launch from the top, bro?
Because it's not really possible. The way the rocks are and the layout, you need a little bit better of a space.
You know, it seems like every Alaskan has an escape of some sort. You know, I think that's one thing I'm realizing after coming back is everyone gets out and does something. Hunting, for you, it's paragliding. For us, it's snowboarding. There's snow machining. I think that's one thing that makes Alaskans unique.
Oh, it's an incredible place. I mean, wherever you go, just outside Anchorage, no matter where you go, you know, within 30, 40 minutes, you have incredible opportunities. Whether it's, you know, if you want to do some backcountry snowboarding, paragliding, kayaking, you know, surf the board tide, it's amazing. That's why whenever I come back, I feel like it's not enough time. You know, you're just like trying to like check the boxes, like, okay, went pack rafting, went kayaking, now I'm going to fly. And there's just not enough time. There's so many amazing places.
Yeah, and I, you know, after growing up here, I feel like that's something that's new to Alaska as far as our identity. That it, you know, it used to be about work and money and coming up here, and now I feel like it's transitioning more. I see a lot of people kind of our age in their late 20s, early 30s, and they're not up here for these great construction jobs or these pipeline jobs. They're up here for this like pursuit of adventure. And I don't know if that existed as much as like the 80s, even the early 90s, you know, attracting people for adventure and like, you know, outdoor escape.
There's an op-ed in ADN a while back that was talking about how younger generations are working less and, you know, opting to get outside. And then I think it's like, I could be wrong. I think it was saying basically that younger generations don't have work ethic. But you know, I was looking.
That's how they circled it back around.
Yeah,
that was the. That was the theme.
But I was like, you know,
Yeah.
You know, they're working, but then they're also, you know, thinking, yeah, you know, maybe there's all this amazing stuff to experience. Get outside. That seems way better if you can have that balance.
Did they turn it into a political issue? Like, that sounds like a pretty fucking liberal way of thinking.
I don't remember. I mean, this came out like a few months ago, and I just read it and was just kind of like, what?
Yeah.
At first, it was kind of like, oh yeah, and then it like started just like turning into like millennials are lazy.
Yeah, totally.
I was like, what?
Things are different. That's just the reality. And you know, when things become different, and you become older, and you don't understand them. That's what you say, right? You don't choose to understand it. I mean, think about like GDP per capita. Think about credit systems. Just think about the way our economy works and the individual survives. We're not dependent on, you know, working 50 hours and saving as much as we need to. That's just not how our system's designed.
Well, I think that it's because we can't. I mean, I can't imagine a future where I own a house.
Yeah, no, it's insane. I mean, I can't buy a house here. I mean, the only place I could like foreseeably afford something is in Greece. That's I've actually been looking at that because, you know, I'd love to have a place in Alaska, but it's not feasible. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of insane. So yeah, whenever you hear people being like, oh, you know, millennials, or it's like, you know what, the world is not the same place it was. Hell, even 20 years ago.
So and that's the problem with people not being informed and not having the proper statistics to even understand that. And we don't deliver that kind of information to people.
Yeah, and I think people are really quick to generalize too. And, you know, buzzwords like millennials or hell, even liberals or conservatives just gets thrown out there as just a blanket term to generalize everyone. And it's really disingenuous to actually having a conversation and looking at something and critically thinking about issues or why something is the way it is, rather than just, you know, pointing a finger and being like, that's X. therefore it's this.
Well, it's easier to put the blame on an unknown because then it becomes a Band-Aid and you don't need to actually deal with the actual situation. I mean, I know that we all, being millennials, know a lazy ass millennial.
Yeah, but there, and there's
one in this room right now.
But there's lazy 50-year-olds. There's lazy.
Exactly.
It's just like it's stereotyping. It's
I'd be. It's my opinion that Alaskans could be the first ones to step out of this kind of haze we're in, because we tend to be free thinking, and not want to be boxed in or labeled. And so if we are looking at the changing of the direction and people are going to be, woke.
Second time, 2 times in one podcast.
I got to really find a new word, but Alaskans could be the first ones out of, when you just look at Americans, I guess.
Just because we're so isolated, is that what you're getting at?
No, because we're not really isolated anymore with the internet. That's something I'm kind of realizing. And I would say
we still have a Blockbuster though.
It closed down.
No, the last one.
It did, yeah.
What did they do with?
Or actually, the one in Fairbanks. It's in Fairbanks that it closed down.
No, Fairbanks is closed. Went out of business the same time as the one in Anchorage. There's one left in Bend, Oregon.
What happened to all of Russell Crowe's memorabilia that John Oliver?
I actually have it at my house.
He's actually wearing it right now.
Currently.
I hope you didn't wash it, right?
Of course, no.
Okay, good.
Well, that's what that smell is.
No, I think you're right. I mean, the main thing, especially what makes Alaska interesting, is our main industries are tourism, oil, and fishing. And if this state is going to, because we've seen just recently over the past few years when oil really dropped off, we've seen the impact on it and felt it. And if we're going to, really grow and still develop the state and have a functioning economy, we've got to figure out something, that's more sustainable and a different alternative. Because, the way things are going, oil's not going to be, as profitable for the state or, as sensible, really. And we were already seeing, that kind of conundrum take place as AI is gonna, I think the figures are by 2030 take out like 30% of jobs in America alone.
Holy shit!
So
where did you read that?
UBI, baby.
A bunch of different. I'm developing a series for National Geographic, and it's it's kind of about a variety of things of climate change and basically how the future is going to shake stuff up. And it's kind of like a blueprint to how, and it's addressing the problems, but then also offering solutions. And
it's like futurists, basically.
Yeah. Basically.
Solutions journalism.
Yeah. With a little bit of entertainment, you got to have that factor. But I mean, basically we're going to have to rethink what is a job. Not everyone's going to, already working 40 hours a week. Like most people you talk to work in an office, they're like, yeah, really it only takes me like 2 hours to get everything done, and the rest is pretending to be busy.
Or just acting angry like George Costanza.
Yeah, or
George is angry.
or you're waiting for like, Steve to get, his report to you.
Fucking
yeah,
Steve.
well, guess what? Steve can get your report to me if I'm in like Costa Rica surfing.
Yeah,
now.
Exactly. Now there's no point to really,
So hurry up, Steve.
If people
TPS reports.
If people have a decent work ethic, you shouldn't have to go to an office. You can get it done, and then this whole idea that you have to have X amount of hours, and it's like if you get the job done, you get it done. But so AI is taking away all these jobs. We're gonna have to rethink. Shit, what's a job? A lot of people are talking about. Bill Gates has talked about the idea of universal income.
Yeah, UBI.
Elon Musk has too. Yeah, totally. Because there's not going to be enough.
Could you explain that?
Universal basic income, basically meaning that because AI is going to be like, for example, the biggest companies that have the most data, Google, Facebook, are going to have the biggest platforms for it. So essentially what you would do is you would tax these companies and basically build out a, welfare system.
Basically an ongoing permanent fund dividend. Zuckerberg came up to Alaska to study the permanent fund dividend as a way to look at how does universal basic income it's an example, right?
Yeah, so it'd cover your costs for basic rent. But then, I mean, it's extremely complicated because, yeah, you'd have to, start controlling housing costs or have subsidized housing. We got a long ways to go, but the conversation's starting to happen because whether we like it or not, we're going to have to figure out there's going to be a lot of people out of jobs. So, I mean, truckers already, like the Tesla's trucker system, there's no reason for anyone to be driving trucks anymore.
30,000 of the highest paying trucker jobs will be like gone in 25 years or something is a statistic I just read.
And this is because of Tesla?
Well, because of technological developments.
Self-driving cars. Yeah.
Okay.
But there's one concept I read, and this actually makes sense for these like self-driving trucks, and this is called universal basic ownership. And that people become owners of the robots. Like someone wrote a paper on this and was like, this could be some way to kind of still maintain the capitalistic drive that doesn't create complacency and laziness that they fear that like a UBI would do, right? And that we wouldn't see like economic growth anymore because people could just collect their check and sit on their ass and play video games. Mm-hmm. And so the idea was that, well, if you're responsible for owning some of this stuff and maybe it's maintenance or taking care of it or like there's some kind of competition there, mm-hmm. that could be a way. And I didn't really buy into it, but it was an interesting concept as we like explore kind of the...
Yeah, there's a lot of other discussions that need to happen about. I mean, another thing is that to value other stuff and label it as a job. So, you would go to, say, a nursing home and you'd get your universal basic income. And then it would be like you do X amount of hours, basically going and what now is volunteer work would be your new job. Go clean up a park, go, the stuff that basically human interaction would become the new thing that's valued.
Dude, we're basically finding a way to create like a, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a perfect society. What do they call
Utopia?
A utopia. Yeah. It's like, that's almost what we would, well, you think we'd like inevitably go that way because that's what, humans would want to do. Right. And so maybe that's what it sounds like, right? Like,
yeah.
Long
way to go.
Yeah. But like, 3/4 of our population doesn't have to go work in a factory and get sick with cancer. Now, like 3/4 of our population gets to go and take care of society and give back. Stuff we used to call volunteering is actually paid work, and what it does is create almost a perfect society.
Is that what you want?
No.
To have the robots be our overlords?
Yeah. I just want to own the robots, man.
We're kind of already there with, everyone with their smartphones.
Yeah, exactly.
You walk down the street and everyone's got their face in it. No one looks up anymore or out, or you sit at a bar.
Well, pretty soon the smartphones will be in the glasses, so we will be able to look at each other, right?
Yeah. Just not paying attention.
You spend a lot of time in the Middle East, and then you come back to Alaska. For like some of our Alaskan listeners who might not understand it over there or get to travel over there, are there any similarities that you have noticed between that culture and Alaskan culture? I think of one similarity, and maybe you can help me come up with the name or remind me what it is, but there's a holiday in Islamic culture where they sacrifice a bunch of goats. Is that correct? Is it wrong?
Yeah,
it's Eid, right?
Eid al-Adha, yeah.
Okay, and so when I think of that, I think of like hunting season in Alaska because it's very subsistence-based, feeding your family. Mm-hmm. And I was trying to think today, like, what are the similarities in cultures?
Well, I mean, I think it's same kind of everywhere. A lot of people, look at the Middle East as, especially the U.S.'s relationship with it as one that of, exploitation of oil, of wars, drone strikes, and then ISIS. They see, a very, very small part of it and don't realize that, that's such a small part of it. And that obviously, there's such a rich history there. And, most people everywhere I've traveled, it's the same thing. People want to be able to provide for their family. They want to have a job and they want to live their lives. And most of the time war or, oppressive governments get in the way of that. So, especially, in Lebanon, you see, people love, they're out having big dinners, cooking food together, their families, music, dancing.
They're people. They're just people.
Yeah, it's the same everywhere.
Yeah.
It's the same everywhere. And you've got, extremists, there, and you also have extremists here. I mean, basically, the version of Al Qaeda, in the U.S. is like the KKK, or, some of these militias you have. So it's, just remembering that those are outliers. That and the way media works is, of course, the craziest people tend to get the most attention. And it kind of like it's an echoing chamber that makes it seem like it's much bigger than it is. When in reality, that I think a lot of people should go visit. So Lebanon's beautiful. There's a lot of amazing places. There's problems for sure, but there's problems here also. It's a big world out there, and most people are. There's a lot more things that we have in common than that divide us, and it's just like little tiny things that seem to just polarize us and send us flying apart. And that, really here in America, that I think hopefully sooner we need to kind of put that aside and realize that, why are basically a bunch of old white men in Congress dividing us when, they're like, you can't have affordable health care. Meanwhile, their health care program, covers their boner pills. It's insane. So, I think realizing that we have a lot more in common.
So we've talked a lot about heavy subjects right now, and you kind of gave us a little sneak peek at your accent ability and your ability to imitate. Do you want to just kind of end on some of your impressions?
Sure. I can do like, I think at least a decent Attenborough.
Wait, who's that?
David Attenborough? Come on, Planet Earth?
Oh, I've seen it, but I didn't know that was the narrator.
Okay.
I apologize.
I love your Attenborough.
Yeah?
Let's do it.
All right, let me think about.
Can you do it with like a silverback gorilla fighting a grizzly bear? A Kodiak grizzly?
Okay.
Can you do that?
Though highly unusual, the silverback gorilla comes across the grizzly bear. It's a battle for who will take home today's dinner, a whale carcass, and no one's going to give up easily. This time of year, the grass is dying, so visibility is clear, and the bear's aware the silverback is moving in.
That is so much better than the YouTube video,
That
dude.
was so good, dude. And so who won?
Oh man, I don't know who would win that. I mean, the bear's claws is a big advantage, but silverbacks are massive. But I would say, a grizzly, the claws.
Yeah, and the teeth.
But it would be, the silverback's got big teeth too. But I think the
But they're not incisors.
Yeah.
You know, I think
wow. We have a biologist here? A zoologist?
Is that a marine biologist over there George Costanza?
I think the Kodiak rips out the jugular of the gorilla and it's over.
I say the silverback pounds that into the dust.
I don't know. We're going to figure this out at the end of Crude Conversations.
Yeah.
But man, thanks for coming on, dude.
Thank you. Thanks, Michael.
Appreciate it. And,
All right.
and thanks for all the work you're doing over there. It's important.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah.
Take care.
You can support local grassroots journalism at patreon.com/Crude Magazine. If you're not familiar with Patreon, it's a platform that makes it easy for you to support content that matters to our community for as little as $1 a month.
Crude Conversations is written, hosted, and produced by Cody Liska and Dustin H. James for Crude Magazine. Intro music was produced by Alcoda Beats.